on December 6th, 1865, 6 months after Juneteenth. Now, going back to the Emancipation Proclamation, which everybody seems to get so twisted, keep in mind what Lincoln said. Lincoln said, for those states in rebellion against the Union, and there were 11 of them, but in the Emancipation Proclamation, Lincoln only mentioned 10 of them. And the only reason he only mentioned 10 is because the 11th state that he didn't mention was Tennessee. He didn't mention them because the Union already had control of Tennessee. So he said, for those states in rebellion against the Union, slavery is now free, or over. Now, keep in mind, there were 4 border states in which slavery was still practiced. Those border states were Maryland, Missouri, Kentucky, and Delaware. So when Lincoln said that to him, I want you to imagine this, and you don't have to imagine, this is just a fact. When those 11 states left the Union, they didn't act as 11 individual states. They formed a confederacy. And when they formed a confederacy, in effect, they formed their own nation, which means they elected a president, Jefferson Davis. They elected a vice president, Alexander Stephens of Georgia. They wrote a Confederate Constitution. They were their own nation, Brother Roland. So when Lincoln issued, quote unquote, an executive order trying to tell them what to do, that's like the Prime Minister of Canada trying to tell the United States citizens what to do. He didn't have any authorization. That's why it took a war. So that's why I'm saying to you that when the news is that they got the word a year and a half late, it didn't matter. The Confederacy were their own nation. They didn't give a damn what the United States said, what Lincoln said. That's why it took the war. Now, as far as them being the last blacks enslaved, I just heard your last guest. I've heard all of you say how important it is to get it right. Today, there's a movement that has swept this country that we should all be proud of, Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. Do we think that Black lives just started mattering? Because let's go back to what happened with the Emancipation Proclamation. Lincoln said that in those states not in rebellion against the Union, slavery is still legal. Keep that going. 2 of those states were Delaware and Kentucky. 2 of them was Maryland and Missouri. And keep in mind, West Virginia wasn't a state when the Civil War started. It became a state after Virginia seceded. And those 48 counties didn't want to secede, so they became a state after the Civil War. So now let's look at those 5 border states. Maryland, on November 1st, 1864, before the Civil War ended, Maryland abolished slavery. Missouri, on January 11, 1865, before the Civil War ended, they abolished slavery. West Virginia, the newly entered slave state, on February 3rd, 1865, ended slavery. The Civil War ends on April 9th, 1865. 2 months later, Granger rides into Galveston, Texas, and issues General Order Number 3, which we now call June 19th. I ask you to remember what was going on in Kentucky and Delaware after the Civil War. What was